How long do you plan on staying at your parents' house? Enough.
My husband barged into my parents' house, yelling and shouting. Enough? That's my line. You're the one who's been ignoring me all this time. I don't have any affection left for my husband. Why are you telling me now? You've been ignoring me all along. In the next moment, my husband turned red-faced and said,
You've gotten quite cheeky all of a sudden, haven't you? Don't get cocky just because you're at your parents' house.
Was my husband always this rough in his speech? I found myself silenced by the forcefulness of his words.
You're really a foolish woman. Well, I'll forgive you this time, so hurry up and go home.
Despite his exasperated tone, I had no intention of going back. Are you misunderstanding something? Our married life is over.
Ha! What do you mean by that?
Haven't you heard anything from your mother? Well, let me tell you. I wonder how long he can keep up this tough attitude. I told the truth to my husband with a defiant smile. My husband Jake and I got married 2 years ago. We both work in sales at an electronics parts manufacturer and, being colleagues, we often went out for drinks after work.
Being with you always makes me feel calm.
My husband used to say things like that before we started dating, and I felt the same way. That's probably why we naturally became drawn to each other and started dating. We didn't interfere with each other much, and we weren't overly clingy, but he was someone I felt I could spend the rest of my life with. After dating for about a year, he proposed to me. Of course, my answer was yes. 3 months after accepting his proposal, we had our wedding ceremony, rented an apartment close to our workplace, and started our newlywed life. Although we were married, we didn't feel ready to have children yet, so I didn't quit my job.
I'm going out for a bit.
Again? Can't you help with the cleaning sometimes?
I'm busy with work and feeling stressed. I'll do it next time. Alright, I'm off.
Since we got married, my husband has always been out somewhere on his days off, almost without fail, from early in the morning. There have been only a few times he's actually stayed home on a day off. I understand he's tired from work, but so am I. I'm not asking him to do things during the week, but we're married, so it would be nice if he could help out occasionally. However, my mother was in the same position in her marriage, and I've come to accept that this is just how things are as a wife. I tried not to dwell on it too much. It's a bit sad that my husband doesn't help out, but I don't have any particular hobbies, and I'm not fond of going out either. Maybe because of my personality, I don't mind doing household chores. However, occasionally, I wished he would just say, "Can I help?" Originally, one big reason we got married was because we didn't interfere with each other. So, I never felt the need to strongly ask my husband for help, believing that someday he would offer to help on his own. 1 month passed, and one night, my husband simply said he was going out for a drink and returned home very late. "Who were you drinking with?" "You were out quite late," I asked when he was taking off his jacket. But my husband just turned to me in silence and walked into the living room, ignoring me. Here we go again. I wonder if something unpleasant happened at the gathering? My husband has always been unusually quiet when he's in a bad mood. In such a case, it's best to just leave him alone. I left my husband in the living room and decided to go to bed that night. At this point, there was nothing more I could do. No matter what anyone says, he completely refuses to engage in conversation, and dealing with someone like that just wears me out. Anyway, by morning, he'll probably be back to his usual self. The next morning, when I was preparing breakfast, my husband woke up. "Good morning. Did something happen yesterday?" I asked him in the usual manner, but once again, he just glanced briefly at me and said nothing. Without saying a word, my husband took out some coffee from the fridge and left the living room. Huh. This time, something feels off. Usually, he's back to normal after a night, but this kind of pattern has never happened before, and I was really confused. Not talking to me for 2 days straight. He must be really upset about something. I didn't want to pry into what was bothering him, so I didn't try to start a conversation. I decided to observe the situation for a while. That's all I thought about it. However, his demeanor remained unchanged that night and the following day. I began to feel that just waiting and watching wasn't enough. I had never experienced being ignored by my husband for several days, and I started to worry that our relationship might not recover from this. Desperate to establish some form of communication, I attempted to create opportunities for discussion with my husband. Yet, he continued to ignore all attempts, whether through WhatsApp messages or written notes. I couldn't understand what was bothering him so much. If I were the cause, I wished he would just tell me. If my husband didn't want to talk, I decided to slip a letter into the lunch bag I packed for him. At home, he always finished his meals, and his lunchbox was left empty in the sink. I thought if he found a letter from me when he opened his lunch at work, he would surely react. But even this strategy proved futile. Feeling completely at a loss, I decided to take more drastic measures. I decided not to prepare dinner. When my husband, unaware of anything, returned home, there was no dinner tonight, unlike usual. Surely, he would say something in this situation, right? My husband looked around the table and then stared at me. Had he finally decided to say something? I held my breath, waiting for him to speak. However, to my disappointment, my husband just left the house without saying a word. I was truly shocked by this behavior. Why did he leave without saying anything? Is this what marriage is supposed to be like? So empty? Being completely ignored by my husband, I could only sit on the couch in the living room feeling bewildered. In the end, my husband didn't come home that day, and I spent the evening alone. The next morning, my husband was still nowhere to be seen. Did he just go to work like that? As I was thinking that, I found a note on the table. It said, "You're a wife, so don't slack off on your duties." It was written in messy handwriting. How can someone who doesn't even engage in proper conversation act so self-righteous? If he wants to maintain our marriage, then why is he ignoring me to this extent? We haven't had a proper conversation in the past month. Upon seeing the note, anger towards my husband exploded within me. I can't take this anymore. I can't bear it anymore. I'm going back to my parents' house. Being with someone who doesn't even want to have conversations feels suffocating, and if that's the case, I'd rather leave. Alongside my husband's hastily written note, I left behind those words and decided to return to my parents' house. I traveled an hour from the apartment where we lived, and finally arrived at my parents' house.
Julia? What's going on?
My parents, who welcomed me, were surprised by my sudden return. It's understandable. Their daughter came back out of the blue. When I explained to them about being continuously ignored by my husband, They welcomed me without saying anything.
Julia, you must have been through a lot. You can stay here until you feel better.
Their warm words meant everything to me. Moreover, I felt truly relieved to have an environment where I could talk like this. Thank you. I'll stay here for a while and observe my husband's behavior. Expressing my gratitude to my parents, I decided to keep an eye on my husband's reaction. The day I returned to my parents' house, there was no contact from my husband, as expected. Normally, when a wife goes back to her parents' house, the husband would at least make a phone call, right? Well, whatever. Until he says something first, I won't go back and I won't contact him either. I was determined, but even after several days passed, there was no contact from him. No phone calls, no WhatsApp messages. And of course, he didn't come to my parents' house either. If he's going to be that thorough about it, then I'll play along. That was my initial stance, but as days went by without any contact from him, I found myself caring less and less about him. And before I knew it, 6 months had passed since I returned to my parents' house. One day, as I opened the front door to go shopping, I found my husband standing there with a fierce expression. Huh? What are you doing here? Having completely forgotten about him, I couldn't help but blurt out. Surely, he must have something to say to me. What is he going to say? As I watched him standing there sternly, I instinctively braced myself, but he continued to glare at me in silence. So, it seems he is still playing this ridiculous game after all this time. If that's the case, there's nothing to talk about, so why doesn't he just leave? Thinking this, I tried to ignore him and go shopping, but he suddenly tried to enter the house in silence. Huh? Wait, what are you doing? Stop it. I hurriedly stopped him, but he looked puzzled, as if he didn't understand why he was being stopped. Don't just barge into someone's house. I'll call the police, you know? I blurted out at my husband. Seeing me like this, my husband smirked.
You've become quite cheeky for a wife.
His voice, which I heard for the first time in a while, was low and cold. What? What's the matter? You're the one who's been ignoring me all this time. It's annoying to show up suddenly like this.
Ha! When did you become so high and mighty? Just because you're at your parents' house, don't get cocky with me.
Wait. Did he always talk like this? Cocky? Me? I never thought he'd say something like that. Despite being silenced by my husband's pressure, he continued to lash out at me.
Don't screw around. You've been away from home for half a year, doing nothing and lazing around at your parents' place. Damn it.
No, wait. Why do I have to be told all that? After all, you're the one who started ignoring me. I've been the one receiving accusations all this time, but gradually, anger towards him started to overflow within me. If it's come to this, then I'll speak my mind too. Originally, it's your fault for starting to ignore me. So why do I have to hear all this from you?
Ugh, why are you so angry? Calm down. Listen, if you come back now, I'll forgive you.
He said it to me with a look of disbelief, but why can he speak in such a condescending tone? Upon hearing his words, I responded to him like this. I'll forgive you? I don't need your forgiveness. You're already a stranger to me. Upon hearing that, my husband looked puzzled.
Ha! A stranger? What are you talking about?
Exactly what I said. Don't make me repeat it. In the next moment, my husband's face turned as red as an apple, and he started shouting again.
All you do is talk nonsense. Have you gone crazy from spending half a year in your parents' cozy home? We're married, aren't we?
If we're married, then why didn't you try to talk to me? You ignored me because you were unhappy with something, right?
Don't make assumptions. I never said anything like that. Now pack your things and let's go home.
I've had enough. Why do I have to endure being spoken to like this by this man? It's pathetic that he doesn't even know what's been happening for the past 6 months. Maybe it's time to show him the reality. You've been shouting so loudly, but you really have no idea, do you?
Ha! What are you talking about?
Didn't your mother tell you anything?
She didn't tell me anything. What are you talking about?
He really doesn't know anything. Well then, I'll tell him. Your mother brought divorce papers. They had your signature on them, and I signed them too because I didn't want to continue living like this anymore. A month after I returned to my parents' home, I received a call from my mother-in-law and headed to a nearby cafe. There, my mother-in-law handed me a divorce paper signed by my husband. What exactly does this mean?
What do you mean? Jake told me that you haven't been coming home and that you haven't been having conversations.
As she spoke, my mother-in-law's gaze mirrored the same cold look my husband often gave me. Did he ask you to give me this divorce paper?
Yes, that's right.
At that moment, I couldn't help but feel relieved. I wouldn't have to be with my husband anymore. The thought made me feel so much lighter. Understood. Well then, I'm fine with the divorce, so I'll sign it. Then I received the divorce paper signed by both me and him, and I submitted the paperwork to the city hall that same day. That's it. Got it? So, we're not married anymore. When I clearly conveyed to my ex-husband that we were divorced, his earlier confidence vanished, and he suddenly became flustered. His face gradually turned pale, and he began sweating profusely.
No, that's not it. I only gave it to my mom to reassure her.
Where could you find such a mother who feels reassurance in receiving divorce papers? I was utterly dumbfounded by his response. And?
That's why. I never intended to submit those divorce papers anywhere. They're invalid.
If you didn't intend to submit them anywhere, why did you even sign them? Besides, they've already been submitted to the city hall, so there's no way they can just be invalidated just like that. I'm telling you, I've already submitted it and it can't be invalidated so easily.
You can just retract them by apologizing to the city hall, right? I'll even apologize to them with you. It'll be tough for you if it's really finalized, won't it?
How much further does he think he can mock me? Being divorced would be tough for me? Give me a break. It won't be tough at all.
Yes, it will. We're not young anymore, you know. Who would want to marry a divorced person at our age? So, I'm telling you it's better to cancel the divorce. You should be happy, right?
Even at this point, he still says such things. Can this man do anything besides acting all high and mighty? Why did I even marry someone like him? That's what I thought, feeling incredulous at his words. Hey, You know, everything you've been saying is all about yourself, right? Divorce isn't going to magically disappear, and I'll be just fine without you. Besides, I already have someone else. It seems my ex-husband hasn't quite grasped what I said. He remained silent. Since it seems like you didn't get it, let me say it again. I'm seeing someone else, not you. This time, it seemed he understood clearly. He started making noise suddenly.
What do you mean by that? Huh? You're lying, aren't you? You're just saying that because you don't want to come back home.
It's not a lie. It's the truth.
It's definitely a lie. You're mocking me. I won't forgive you.
Even if he says he won't forgive me, it's still the truth. How can I make him believe it? As I struggled with what to do, I felt a presence behind me.
Are you okay? I've been hearing you talking loudly for a while now.
Standing behind me was my boyfriend. Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry for worrying you.
That's okay, but you said you were going shopping, and you didn't seem to be going anytime soon, so I was wondering what happened.
My ex-husband looked up at my boyfriend coming from the house. That's understandable. He recently joined the company where my ex-husband and I work, but he's in field operations, so he doesn't know much about my ex. He used to play rugby for a long time, so he's tall and has a pretty solid build.
Julia, who's this guy? Do you know him?
Oh, him? He's my ex-husband. While my boyfriend and I were talking, my ex-husband remained silent the entire time. He seemed intimidated by the significant difference in physique.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
My ex-husband could barely muster a response to my boyfriend's greeting and took a step back.
So, what brings you here? You're not causing any trouble for Julia, are you?
My boyfriend directed a sharp gaze at my ex-husband as he questioned him. It seemed my ex-husband realized he was at a disadvantage.
Yeah. I haven't done anything.
Saying so, he tried to leave. If you ever come back again, I won't hesitate to call the police. I firmly pushed him out of the doorway and closed the door. He was so intimidated by my boyfriend. He probably won't come back anymore. Since then, as I expected, my ex-husband hasn't come back to my parents' house. Ultimately, it was his own fault for starting to ignore me for his own reason, leading to irreversible consequences. Moreover, the divorce papers handed to my mother-in-law were signed by me, and it actually went through with the divorce were truly foolish. It's all his own doing. A week later.
Hey, have you heard from your ex-husband recently?
Huh? Oh, I totally forgot about him until you mentioned it, haha. If my boyfriend hadn't brought up my ex-husband, I probably wouldn't have remembered. While I haven't received any messages, now that it's mentioned, it does make me curious. I decided to call a mutual friend of ours to ask about his current situation. Is Jake doing okay lately? I haven't seen him at work.
He's been down since the divorce. Seems like he's not doing well.
Really? I assumed he'd be fine, considering who he is.
Well, actually, he quit his job 3 days ago.
I was taken aback by what my friend told me. 3 days ago? That's right after he showed up at my parents' place. And nobody mentioned anything about him quitting his job. Wait, why so suddenly?
I don't know if it's because of the divorce or what, but he suddenly lost all motivation and just couldn't stand anything anymore. He told the company he was leaving to take care of his mother, but he asked not to spread it around too much because he didn't want to worry anyone. Truth is, the caregiving thing was a lie. Apparently, he's just been drinking and lazing around every day.
I see. Well, thanks for letting me know about all this. Then I hung up the phone. I didn't realize that my ex-husband was so shocked. Well, it's his fault anyway, so I don't really care. Since I've just divorced, I can't marry my current boyfriend right away. But if things continue smoothly, we plan to register our marriage next year. I want to communicate better this time and build a happy home together.